You're listening to the Inner Strength Show. If you want to step into your greatness, you've come to the right place. Here is your host, the human strength expert, Kyle Newell.
What's up, guys and girls? It's Kyle Newell from UnlockingYourInnerStrength.com and just plain old Unlocking Your Inner Strength, which is a coaching program that is developing as we speak into different areas. But I'm back for another episode, and this one is going to be a part of a series. It's gonna continue on. It's gonna, we're gonna add to this as we go. But basically, the gist of it is Kyle Newell's rules. And I know that's kind of rhymes, so I think it's pretty cool. But Kyle Newell's rules, today we're going to go over number 1 through 5. And before we get to them and break them down, the reason I think this is important, that you start thinking about rules for your life or a life philosophy, is because discipline will get you everything you want in life. Now, don't take that to think that discipline means no fun. Discipline allows you to create the time, if you listen back to the last podcast, to create the time, the free time, to have all the fun you want. Okay? And part of discipline is having rules to follow. If a team of athletes or a football team didn't have any rules, there'd be pandemonium. Okay, they would not achieve what they wanted to achieve. They would not be able to go for the championship, to win the conference, to go to the national title, to make it to the Super Bowl. It's all because they have discipline and they have rules. All right. With that, let's get into it. These are in no particular order. I'll be making notes as we go through this, because I don't know how many this will wind up being over the course of the years. But I imagine there's probably going to be a lot. Okay, so today we're just going over number 1 to 5. So the first thing here is you control everything. Now, what I mean by that is not that you have mind control and that type of stuff. Yes, bad stuff will happen to you. Unexpected stuff will happen to you. But if you always trace it back, you are responsible for every single thing in your life. And even if it was some unforeseen circumstance, first of all, if you weren't in that time and space and place at that time, it wouldn't have happened to you. And you might say, well, you could say that about anything. Yeah, you could. But if you're going to say it about whatever happened to you, unforeseen circumstances, you are still in control of your attitude about the situation at all times. And that is something that you cannot argue with. So it kind of goes back to like what we were talking about in the last episode with time. If we know how to manage our time and to dictate our time, we have more freedom. As soon as we adopt a mindset of, I'm in control of this, I'm responsible for this, I'm responsible for my life, kind of looking in the mirror and saying, my bad, that gives you the ultimate freedom in life. And people always think it's the opposite. They always want to put blame and pigeonhole the blame on somebody else, thinking that it gets them off the hook. It doesn't get them off the hook. It just makes it so somebody else has control over your life. And it seems so silly, but that's what most people do. So as soon as you realize that you are responsible, you control everything in your life, you're going to be way ahead of the rest of the herd, or the other sheeples out there, as we call them, which I got from Doberman Dan. So sheeples, just as an aside, guys, or that's the herd mentality. That's the sheep plus people. So there you go. Now you understand that. But that's been one of the biggest aha moments, and it's something I learned very early on, was to kind of take control of every single thing that has manifested in your life. And realize this before we go on to the second rule. If you adopt this mindset, you'll realize that pain and mistake and failure are the greatest teachers we have. So you do not want to avoid them at all times. You don't want to try to pass that stuff off to somebody else, because that is where the power comes from. And why this is one of my top rules is is pain, mistake, failure. Those are your greatest teachers you're ever going to have in your life. But if you're constantly trying to put the blame on somebody else and not take responsibility for everything that's happened to you, then you can't learn from those situations, because your brain and spirit and body are going to internalize those things as something somebody else has to learn from, not you. All right. So that's why the mindset rule number 1, you control everything, is very important. Number 2, deadlines are your lifelines. Now, I was going to put this in the time management episode that I did, but this is not just a time management thing. It's another life rule, and a big one. So go back to what I had said in the time management episode, where your work will expand to fill the time that you give it. Okay? And so many people are procrastinators, yet when push comes to shove, when that deadline is due and that budget report is due, or that school paper is due, or your newsletter or article, whatever, you get it done. So something that might be due in a month, it doesn't take you a month to do. You'll probably do it on the last day if you're like most people, but you get it done in an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours. And that's because you're up against a deadline. Deadlines are lifelines, okay? And that is so important. That's one of the coaches that I have in my life personally has really hammered home to me. You need a deadline on almost everything, because without a deadline, most of the time, it's just a dream, okay? There's no end point, so there's no urgency to do it. This podcast is a great example. I was sitting on this idea for over a year. It was always on my to-do list. It was eating up energy in my brain. It was just like a mental magnet that was just sitting over me. So I hired my producer Jonathan, and he gave me a deadline. And that was part of the reason I hired him, was I knew I was going to invest in this with both my time and money, that I would follow through with it. And it's huge. You can get so much done when you have deadlines. And that's why when we set goals, you have the SMART acronym, but it's got to be specific, and there's got to be a timeline on it. Okay, when you're doing goals, just saying I want to lose 30 pounds. Well, by when? Before you're dead? So you got to think of stuff like that. But that's rule number 2: deadlines are your lifelines. Number 3, and this is a big one. I'm actually going to talk a lot about this at an upcoming mind map workshop I'm putting on. Good is good enough. Let me repeat that. Good is good enough. Now, I write a lot. I love writing. I love writing articles. I love writing stories. I love writing emails. Everything, okay? I love putting out the monthly newsletters. I never, ever go back and reread something that I wrote. Ever. I never proofread it. I never spell check it. And it probably shows. But I don't care, because I get it done and I get it put out there to the world to see. So many people masquerade as, first of all, one of the emails I just sent out, we'll call them mouth breathers, okay, kind of like tire kickers. They focus on the wrong thing. If we're using writing as an example, we'll say, despite your 12-page newsletter, which was maybe had a lot of nuggets of wisdom and knowledge in there, you spelled so-and-so this word wrong on page 6. It didn't affect the message. That's people kind of trying to feel like, wow, it wasn't perfect, so it wasn't that good. Perfectionism is really based in fear. It is fear disguised as a snobby form of fear, if that makes sense. Perfectionism, the reason people can't get stuff out and ready to ship, quote unquote, as Seth Godin always says, is really a way for the brain to try to minimize judgment. Now remember, judgment is very, very threatening to the brain. It puts the brain on high alert, because if we go back to a quick mind map lesson here, the way the brain evolved, right? If you go back thousands of years and I judge you, Billy or Sue, or whoever you are listening to this, and I move you to the outside of the tribe, the pack that we were running around in, that's where the predators roam. Then if I judge you so much, we don't like so-and-so, we kick them out of the tribe. Your chance for survival goes way down. That's where the predators are. You have no protection, okay? Now, although that's not the case nowadays, the brain still is very, very sensitive to judgment, very sensitive. And when people are trying to be perfect and are trying to create the perfect masterpiece, the brain is saying, okay, if it's perfect, nobody can say anything about it, which is garbage because people are always going to have something to say. And they're always going to be putting stuff down. And you want that. You don't want to try to create something that pleases everybody. If you're trying to be in the middle, whatever you're putting out there is going to suck, to be quite frank. Okay, so you got to have your unique voice, and you can't worry about if it's perfect or not. And perfectionism, it just realize in yourself, if you find yourself being a perfectionist and scared to put out that article or that blog that you want to write or make that video or whatever it is, make that piece of music, just do it. Good is good enough. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. None of my writing is ever perfect. Again, I don't care. All right. And as an offshoot of good is good enough, rule number 3, how I was talking about judgment, and actually make note here, that is the reason, guys, why most people are scared of public speaking, is because the brain picks up on this perceived judgment that could come from all these people in the audience, and these people might disagree with you. And a good trick to deal with that, because I used to be petrified of public speaking, and now I'm quite comfortable with it, as long as I know the topic at hand, is if you don't know something and somebody calls you out, just say, look, I don't know. But if you know the answer, feel free to jump in, or I'll look it up and I'll get back to you. Nobody's going to judge you. Nobody's ever died giving a public speech before that I know of. So it's the judgment that causes this fear to rise up, perceived judgment. Usually the fear is just an illusion, as we've talked about in some of the other podcasts. What I was going to say, though, is good is good enough. As far as being part of the pack, 25% of the people out there will love you no matter what you do. 25% of the people are going to hate you or very much dislike you no matter what you do. You're not going to win them over. 25% of the people are going to dislike you but grow to like you. 25% of the people are going to like you and then grow to dislike you. And that pretty much goes for every area of your life. So don't sweat it. There's 25% of people that are going to be with you for the long run, okay? Now, rule number 4. Invest in your food and in your education. Let me repeat that. Invest in your food and in your education. Because those things are literally going to become who you are. The food that you eat, and we're going to do a whole different podcast on this because I'm actually going to be giving a workshop on this in November. The food that we eat, the quality of food actually makes up the tissue of your body, your muscle tissue as it rejuvenates and regenerates, and collagen, everything, your skin. That comes from directly the food that you eat. So if you always want to get the cheap stuff and the garbage stuff that's got a lot of toxins in it, go ahead. That's going to become who you are. And again, I'll get really deep into that in a separate episode that's just based purely on that topic. But education. I had a coaching call with one of my business coaching clients yesterday, and we were talking about, what I brought up to him is, when you have coaching or you're investing in courses or books, most people look at that as an expense. And it's not an expense. It's an investment in you. And the more that you can know about your particular area or just life in general, different areas, you're going to become more valuable. And you're going to be indispensable to certain people. So you can either look at it as spending, like we do with time, or investing. When I first started Newell Strength, almost every dollar I made from teaching either went to somehow building the business or to investing in my education with the business, hiring coaches to mentor me, hiring, getting different training DVDs and books and going to different seminars. Everything I made went to that. And I always knew that other people were not going to invest in themselves the way I would invest in myself. Okay? So invest in your food and in your education, because that is literally whom you become. And if you're a parent listening to this, teach that to your kids. Hammer that home, because a lot of kids don't like to read. A lot of kids are raised on eating fast food and all that. But if they want to live a life of greatness, they've got to go after every advantage they can get. All right, and moving on here to number 5. This one is an interesting one, but it keeps popping in my head over and over. If you suffer fools, it's your own damn fault. And that kind of goes to the saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So if you're suffering fools in your life, it means there's people in your life that are just annoying you, and they eat up too much mental energy, and they take up too much headspace, and they're just a nuisance, whether it's a client, whether it's a family member, whether it's a troll, whether it's a tool boy. You have a choice, okay? And that choice is you can either let it affect you, okay? And remember, what the brain is always perceiving, it's always going to perceive judgment and criticism as very harsh if we allow it, if we're not aware of that fact. But you have a choice, getting back to that, where you can either ignore it, okay, or you can feed it energy and fight the fool with more idiocy, or foolishness, whatever you want to say. I don't think idiocy was a word, but more foolishness. So if you try to fight force with force, nothing good is going to happen. Okay. So the options are, get these people out of your life, whatever you got to do. Don't entertain their phone calls. Don't entertain their nonsense. They're like the time vampires. Let them go be a fool to somebody else, because they don't care. They'll do it anywhere, to anybody, any setting, any situation. Get them out of your life. Limit your time around them if you have to endure them for whatever reason. Maybe they're in your work environment, which I would suggest, okay, maybe you got to switch whatever it is you're doing, because environments are also very either positive or negative to the brain. So limit yourself around them, and think of this analogy when you're suffering with the fool, whether it's a hater or a troll. Think of the rope. And I always tell people that if somebody's really bothering you, or there's a situation that's really bothering you, that situation or that person has one end of the rope, and they're pulling on it. And when you first catch yourself, you're pulling on the other end. So there's tension on the rope, right? And I always use the analogy, because analogy and pictures and little movie clips in our head are very powerful at helping us become self-aware. Just drop your end of the rope. Nobody's telling you have to hold on to it. Drop it and walk away. Let them keep pulling. They'll fall over, or you could tie your end to a tree, if we're using that analogy, because they're going to keep pulling, and they're going to be angry at somebody anyway, and they're going to be a fool to somebody anyway. But you can just simply drop the rope. You don't have to feel that way. You can move on, go on to the next thing. You decide what and whom gets your best energy and most valuable time in your life. So drop the rope, limit your time around them, cut them out of your life surgically, like with a precision knife, whatever it is. Remember that old saying that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And you do not want to be spending your time around fools. That's for sure. So those are the first 5 rules, guys. Remember that the reason I think it's important to have a set of rules in your life and an ongoing list that you're continually updating and a philosophy of your life is because discipline will get you the life that you want. You need rules to have discipline. And to recap the rules, you're in control of everything in your life. Deadlines are your lifelines. Good is good enough. Invest in your food and education because they become whom you are. And if you suffer fools, it's your own damn fault. Now, if you're not already on my email list for Unlocking Your Inner Strength, you can go to unlockingyourinnerstrength.com/rules, and you'll get a PDF summary of the rules I just went over, which will constantly be updated as we do the next episode on rules, whenever that comes. But again, it's unlockingyourinnerstrength.com/rules. Just put your email, first name there, and you will get the PDF. And I want you to hang that, put it in that binder where you put the other PDF, hang it in your office. Anything we can do to help you create self-awareness to move forward in life, that's what I'm here for, to help you step into your greatness. Thanks for listening, guys. I'll be back next week. Spread the word. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to Unlocking Your Inner Strength on iTunes and leave a positive review as long as you find the information positive. If you don't find it positive, leave an honest review. That's all I ask. I don't care if it's 1 star, 2 star. Leave an honest review because it'll help me. All right? Peace out, guys.
You've been listening to The Inner Strength Show. If you enjoyed the show, remember to subscribe, rate, and review us in iTunes.